Thank you for attending tonight's meeting on discussion on printing. My name is Ken Sartorius, and I'm the web chair for the Camera Club. And I hope we have a great night tonight. The goal tonight is to be able to get feedback from all of you on these various topics here. We'll be talking a little bit about using commercial labs or photo labs for printing, why we print our own photos. We'll deal with monitor calibration and ICC profiles or ICM profiles, M for monitor. We'll talk about photographic papers, some printers. We'll talk about soft proofing in Lightrooms, since I think most people use Lightroom. And we'll talk about the print modules in Lightroom to get your print out and through the printer. Then lastly, we'll discuss about mounting boards and matting, and look at some of the resources available. First of all, for discussion, just want to ask, how many people use a photo lab? So people are showing their hands, and quite a few people out of this group of 26 are using them. And who uses it consistently? And we're showing about 7 people that consistently use it. So if we can get feedback on why you use the photo lab.
Well, actually, I take that back because I do have sublimating printers. I use sublimate printers when I'm doing print on site, but when I'm doing just maybe I need a large print, it's more economical price-wise to send it to a lab. You know, with the cost of ink and paper, when you start looking at that, it's actually cheaper if you have a lab do it. And then secondly, I send it there because if it's a professional lab, I'm getting professional quality. Their printers are always calibrated like once an hour, and they use archivable ink, which means that that picture is going to last for close to 100 years. Anything from 16, 20, actually 11 by 14 on up. So I have printed images from Bay Photo that's like 4 feet by 6 feet. And you definitely need to have that done in a lab. There's only so many people can do that anyway.
I recently, me and my sister went and bought a printer together recently. So most of the last membership year, I printed my own. But up till then, I did Nations and National Photo, and I started using National Photo more because although they're a little more expensive, I could get my prints back in a reliable manner. Nations, since the pandemic, their print times, their lead times for competitions, you need to send your stuff in like a month ahead because they've gone all mail. You can't go into the shop anymore. So otherwise, they do good work. Going forward, I'm thinking I'll still print most of my stuff, but there's some instances where, like, I have some of the same concerns Kenny has, where like if I'm putting something I know that's going to be exhibited, I'm probably going to go with a professional printer because I'm looking at some of my old stuff and it does look a tad better from them. Yeah, just a little.
So in the past, I used to print everything myself. And I've gone through 3 different printers, a Canon 2000, an Epson 3880, and another Epson before that I don't even remember. The joy of doing your own printing was that I could see things come out that weren't there on the monitor. And you could see exactly what, you could have a calibrated monitor and it looks great, and then when you print it, it looks yucky. And so the final product happens to be the print. And over here in the Baltimore Camera Club, most everything I submitted, the prints, I made myself. And sometimes I would do 15, 20 prints like a proof and just go through them. And when you have your own thing, you can print it, you can see it, you mark it up, you redo it, you print it, you redo it. And so you can go more towards getting exactly what you want. Then I switched over to using, I've used Nations once in a while, and I've done very well with them. And then I switched over using Miller's. And I really love Miller's. There's consistency, there's quickness. If I submitted something at 3 o'clock today, tomorrow morning it'd be on my doorstep. And that includes, you know, it's printed with a backing and et cetera. If I wanted to have the print not just mounted, but if I wanted to have it framed, et cetera, it takes 2 or 3 days, and it's on my doorstep. You can also get an expedited type of thing. And if you don't like the print, you call them up, you tell them, they'll redo it. What's nice too, some of the labs, and I know Nations used to do it, where you could send in your stuff and you get back 8x10s. And basically it was nothing, it was free. And you get the 810s back, you go ahead and look at them, see if they're good. If they're not good, you just tell them what you want, you fix it up on your monitor, you send it back in, and they take care of it. So there's a tremendous amount of consistency. But on the other hand, I've sent stuff out, and then I get it back, and and so I'll wind up reprinting it myself on my own paper. Of course, I have very specific kinds of paper I want to use, and then I finish them off. I lacquer them, I do lots of little things with them afterwards, which most print shops won't do. So I've gone both ways. I love Miller's, I love Nations, and Bay Photo's done a great job. They all do a good job. There's none of them that, you know, they have to, they must. Excuse me? They wouldn't be in business. Correct. You know, that's the thing. And I've gone to meetings where people come back and say, damn, the lab, they made all my prints, they're all cyan. And I look at them and I say, do you think it's their problem or your problem? All of your prints are cyan. Why? You know? So be very cautious when you start to critique the labs. They do a darn good job. And they're consistent, they're there, and they want your business, they're going to earn it.
For those who are sending their images to labs for printing, are you sending JPEGs? Are you sending TIFF files, PDFs, PSDs? What are you sending? How does that work out, especially in images where you've got high contrast, for example? I mean, I'm thinking black and white. So if you've got a high contrast black and white image, and you've got subtle gradation in tones between the dark parts of the image and the lighter parts of the image, a JPEG is kind of getting into technology that I probably don't even understand, but a JPEG is really only an 8-bit image, right? So, I mean, you're losing some detail in the compression when you're converting from a PSD to a JPEG or from a TIFF to a JPEG. So you're losing some of the quality, and that typically manifests itself in you get step changes in the gradations rather than a gradual change.
I've used Nations, and I've had judges comment to how good the printing is, particularly black and whites, Arthur. So that's my experience.
Okay, we've had great discussion on labs that people use and their success with it. And this slide just represents that many things that you've already said. Does give an example of Nations Photo Lab, $7.50 for an 11x14 color print or monochrome print on matte or glossy paper. And then you can pay 40 cents for color correction. Right now, through MPA, they're giving a discount of 20% until August 5th if you present that code. And then there are other labs mentioned as listed here: National Photo in Pikesville, UPhoto, which is Beltsville, but it's online only, is mentioned about Miller's. And so
I was on Nation's site yesterday, and they're offering a 25% discount. So I think they have discounts constantly.
They do.
So
Get on their email list, you'll get 30 points.
sorry, I could have asked this before, but what exactly does color correction mean? Is it a person sitting in their shop who decides what the right colors are, and how do they do that? And does anyone understand that?
I think it's somebody sitting there, looking at your image and making sure that skin tones are looking good, that you don't have any yellow toning or green toning in the photos.
Okay, steps for when you're going to send your images to the commercial lab. You want to make sure that you know what size you're going to use. If you're going to end up using pre-cut mats, just you fill in the information and then it'll provide you with an answer on the screen. As you see circled, that tells you the quality of the print. And you want to make sure that you do this even if you're printing at home, that the resolution quality is sufficient. Basically, the rule is 300 times the length or width of your image to get to have proper resolution for good print quality. If you need to upsize your photo, you can go into Photoshop, or if you have Topaz Gigapixel, and you can go to the top menu, image size, and then you can choose the desired size and resolution you want. Once you've edited your image, then you need to export it to send it to the lab. So you can do that in Lightroom and do an export, and then there'll be a number of settings that you want to click. And one of them is you do want to do some output sharpening and select the paper that you're going to use when they print it at the lab. Prints are often softened in printing, and so you should use the output sharpening.
So Ken, I think that's when you get into other programs like Topaz, Gigabytes, where on one, they can increase your photo pixels for you if your photo doesn't match what it needs to be.
And I can't speak to Topaz, I can certainly speak to Photoshop or Lightroom, but when you were working on an image, and let's say you crop your image and you crop it down pretty small, and you always look at what the image size is before you start editing it. So if you know, for example, that you want to create a 16 by 20 print, and when you look at the image size in Photoshop or in Lightroom, and it's showing that after you've done your cropping, that at 300 DPI, it's going to be less than 16 by 20, upsize your image at that point before you start any editing. Always, always, always upsize your image before you actually start editing, because I can tell you now it will break apart. Once you start editing and then you decide to go back in after the fact and then upsize your image, the image will start to break apart.
Okay, great. Let's move on and look at why print your own photos. If you do print, why do you do it? So let's get some feedback on that.
I have just like a porch. I don't have a porch. I have a stoop, and people steal things off of it. So if I am expecting something to come in by mail, I mean, I'm literally hanging by the front door waiting for it. It's not worth it. I just print my own.
Well, I like to print my own because I can try different approaches. I can make comparisons, especially with black and white. I use an Epson, I think it's a PC600. It's got a variety of black tones. So I can look at an image in, after it's done and say, yeah, I'm going to try it this way. So it takes a little time, but probably less time than driving over to Nations and driving back some words.
I think if you're going to print a large image, I'm talking about like a 20 by 30, where you're going to spend a lot of money for it, it's better to soft proof it with your own printer first, because you don't want to go out and spend money on a large print and come find out it doesn't look right. So printing at home for that type of work, or like I said, I did one that was 4 feet by 6 feet. You best believe I printed that at home first. Take a look at it, make sure it was fine, and then I size it to what I need. Yeah, and then that particular image cost me close to $300. I cannot, and that was client work. So if I messed up, I can't ask the client to pay for that. I got to pay for it.
I think another good reason to print your own photo, I mean, there's many reasons to print your own photographs, but one is, I guess everybody's familiar with the term, what you see is what you get. Well, I can tell you that what you see is not always what you get when you're printing. And that's especially true for color work. And it's especially true if the colors that you're printing are close to the edge of the gamut within which you're printing. And I don't know whether we get into a discussion about color gamuts or color profiles or anything like that, but as you're getting closer to the edges of the triangle within whichever gamut you're printing into, or whatever gamut is you're looking at on your computer screen, irrespective of whether you have a perfectly calibrated screen, and irrespective of whether you have a perfectly calibrated printer, so you got a very precise color calibration process all the way through to the final print. If the colors on your screen are very close to the edge of the color gamut, I can guarantee that they won't always appear the same when you print it out. And when you get the print, they might just look a little muddy. That you might be a little disappointed that they're not as saturated in the print as you were thinking they were going to be. So similar to what you were saying, before you start sending money off to get somebody to print something, if you've got a highly saturated color print, it'd be a really good idea to print out your own copies first so that you're not disappointed when you get a $20 print back and it doesn't look the way that you were hoping it would.
And you're going to talk about ICC, right? And some of those labs, you can get their color profiles. And I know Nation is one of them.
The other thing, I haven't really used it much yet, is that in the FedEx, I know in Columbia FedEx, when you come in on the right side, they have a big printer, 36-inch printer. And you can make, a lot of 8x10s, put them on a single file and bring it into FedEx, your little card, stipple in, put in your credit card, and it's unbelievable. But you can get 3 feet by I don't know how long, and they're not that expensive, but it's really, it's there. It's available if you need it. But you can get yourself a bunch of proof prints instead of doing, put in 6 8x10s, and you print it out. And you can get it and go home and see what it looks like right there and then, and say, oh, I got to fix this, I got to fix that.
There are a whole lot of papers available to print on. They can give you an effect of itself. So, from lusters to all kinds of papers, watercolor kind of look papers, fine art papers, and so you can get some really interesting prints that way. So a lot of the creative process can be in the printing. And so if you enjoy it, it can give you a lot of more fun as well.
Okay, so I've listed a number of reasons I find it satisfactory, or why other people find it satisfactory to print your images. One is, of course, satisfaction, meaning that you take something from your camera, you edit it, and then you print it out, and it's right there in your hands. So that's a great thing. It can make you a better photographer in that you visualizing the final product and seeing what changes you could make the next time you go out and shoot. It makes you a better editor because you can also see changes that you can make next time that you didn't see or visualize the first time. Great thing is you can display your work to others by putting it up in your house, or giving it away as gifts, or printing cards. For example, I don't buy greeting cards anymore. I make my own cards, use my own images, and I print them on different types of stock, canvas, linen, glossy, luster. So I save a lot of money now just printing out my own cards and sending them out. In the long run, after you've purchased your printer and you're going through your inks, it is cheaper. As we mentioned, Nations Lab 11 by 14 costs $17.50. A 12 by 18 costs $13.70. But with your own printer and the ink that you purchase, 11 by 14 ends up being $277. 13 by 19, $414. And so it'll take a while for you to recoup your investment, but in the very long run, you're able to print out your own images at a cheaper cost. Okay, let's move on now to monitor calibration and ICM profiles. And how many people here calibrate their monitors? Okay, so we just have a few people that actually calibrate their monitors. Before we get into monitor calibration, we first want to speak about monitors, because one thing you have to figure out is if your monitor can be calibrated in a certain color space. Most monitors, just average monitors you buy, have a color space of an sRGB. And really, in terms of quality printing, you want to be able to work with a wider gamut than just sRGB. So you can look at your monitor documentation and see what they say about that. Today, most monitor manufacturers will produce monitors specified for photographers and photo editing. So whether it's Apple, Dell, ViewSonic, BenQ, EZO, Acer, NEC, they all make excellent monitors for the photographer. There are certain things that you want to consider if you do get a different monitor. You want to make sure that when it comes to the color accuracy that you have a variety of gamuts to work with. So beyond the sRGB, first of all, you want that at least 98% accurate, and then you want to see if it's anywhere between 98 to 100% accurate with RGB, possibly P3, which the Apple monitors have. And then most of these monitors will have their own native space, which is a far greater gamut than RGB. And so you want to see, they'll mention in their documentation how color accurate their monitors are according to the gamuts. So you're interested in that. You're also interested in the delta E factor. That is a factor that tells you how close the image you have is represented on the screen or monitor that you're looking at. You want the delta number, E delta number, to be very low. It should be at the very maximum 2, but preferably around 1. And so again, it tells you that what your image looks like is accurately represented on your monitor. Also, these types of monitors have their own hardware calibration, meaning that when you use the software, it is calibrating to a hardware chip inside the monitor. This means that you're going to have a more accurate calibration. The calibration is not working off of your graphics card and memory in your computer, which can adjust, but it's working off of the hardware in your monitor. And so that is critical in terms of your accuracy of your monitor over months. These monitors can get expensive, but for example, I have a BenQ 24-inch monitor, SW240. I purchased it 3 years ago, and it cost me under $400, so around $390. And I find that it does everything I need it to do when I want to uh, calibrate it and then work off of it to do photo editing and printing. Many of these types of monitors also come with their own software that works with the monitor. And so that's the software you want to use when you're calibrating your monitor. So whatever calibration device you get, Spider or Calibrate, you don't want to use their software. You want to use the software to calibrate that comes with these specialized monitors. Okay, so why do monitor calibration? Well, you're working with a certain color space that has to be consistent. You're dealing with what other color space came out of your camera, which is probably RGB. Then you're moving it to your monitor. You're dealing with it through your editing software, and then you're going to send it to your printer. And so you want to be using a consistent color space in every step you're taking. And so you have a range of choices when it comes to your monitor, the color space you want to use, the gamut that you want to use, and those are Adobe, ProPhoto RGB. If you're doing a lot of online work, sRGB. If you're using an Apple or you want to use Apple Display P3, you can use that as your color space. And then there's the native monitor color space. If you want to use that, you can. But you want to use with the broadest gamut of color space you can when it gets to further editing your photos and then printing it. The key point is that in your color manage workflow, you want to make sure that what you see on your monitor is what you're going to get when you print. This slide just represents a few examples of calibration devices you can purchase. We have, for example, a Spider X Pro, which goes for $139. We have the Color Checker Display Pro by Calibrate, right? That is $215. And then we have something that just came out last week, the Calibrate Display 123, which goes for $120. So these are some of the calibration devices you can purchase to calibrate your monitor. In terms of calibration settings, you might want to have more than one setting saved. In terms of editing purposes, you want your white point to be set at D65. You want your luminance to be set at 120. Normally when you purchase a monitor, when it arrives to you, the luminance is set at 160, and so you want to gear it down, because the number one reason that prints are darker than what you see on your screen is because the luminance is too high. So you want to tone that down to 120. For your color space, you want to use RGB or the native display color space. You want to use Gamma 2.2. Gamma is referring to the range of shades and tones in your grays, so you want to set that at 2.2. Your black point could be relative or 0 or whatever your software might suggest. The LUT is the lookup table. This is referring to a 3D diagram of how they map out the colors, the shades, the tones, and usually the software will allow you to set 10 or 12. Some allow you to set 14. But you do want to set the lookup table for one of these, 10, 12, 14. This is going to give you the most accurate color spread or space within the gamma you selected. For printing purposes, I personally set a a different calibration, because usually prints will look too bright on your screen compared to how they're printed out. So I set a printing calibration. I use a white point, still D65, but I set the luminance down to between 70 and 80. All the other settings are that remain the same. But I will print off of this calibration. I'll switch over to this calibration and I'll print off of it, and I'll find that what's displayed on my screen at this print calibration is what I get on my print, and I'm pleased with it. Here's a screenshot of a calibration validation report. After you finish with the calibration, you'll get this report. You'll notice on the very right hand column it gives a delta E figures, and you'll notice that all of them are under 2. They'll also mention the highest number received for whatever shade or color, and also the lowest number for whatever shade or color. And so it shows you that this monitor is very accurate in portraying your image, your original image, with what you see on your monitor. And so this is very important that your monitor be able to do this. This slide just shows you where your monitor profiles are stored on your computer, and also your ICC profiles, which refer to your photographic papers, are stored. And so you can see I've listed where, if you have a Mac, they're in these files, and in Windows PC in this folder structure. And so what I do is I bookmark the folder on my computer so I can access it easily if I want to look at any of these ICCM or ICC profiles. When it comes to your post editing software, in your preferences, you want to set RGB as your preference of editing, or it might say Adobe 1998, or you could select ProPhoto RGB or wide gamut. If you do a lot of editing where it's going to be on display on the internet, then you would want to set your preferences sRGB and save your work in sRGB. Any questions or comments on this?
Yeah, when I was in photography school, our instructors, we had to do a portfolio, and it had to be printed. And the value of having a printed photo is better than having a digital. If I'm on a iPad and I'm showing somebody my work, this is what they're gonna do. Real quick, when you put a 11 by 14 photo in someone's hand, and you got a whole portfolio, they take time to look at it. Print will always show out better than digital. And that's the other reason why you do that. And especially if you're trying to do work for someone, you need to show them a printed portfolio.
Okay, a question has come up about using third-party inks instead of the manufacturer inks for printing.
Me too. I had an Epson, and I was doing a print on site. The ink smeared, it wouldn't lay. What you don't know is that those Epson printers, they have computer chips in them, and it tells you how many dots, per square inch to put in there. If you're using someone else's ink, it can't read that. I had to call Epson about that, and Epson explained that to me when I did it. And also you have to use their paper. Their paper absorbs a certain way for their dots per inch.
If you're using a device to calibrate your monitor in the same light conditions that you're going to be using when you're working on your images. So in other words, if you have a few minutes spare on an evening and you think, you know what, I'm just going to go calibrate my monitor, but the majority of the work that you do on your images is during the day, you've got different light conditions that you're working on, and that if you don't believe me, try it. You know, go home tonight and calibrate your monitor and then calibrate it again tomorrow, and I can guarantee you'll come up with 2 different profiles. So calibrate your monitor under the light conditions that you're normally going to be using to work on your images.
With that same token, i1 Studio, with their calibrator, you can set it on your desk and it will fluctuate with your light that you're working in. But what he's saying is absolutely true. So like I said, if you're working in different light and you calibrate at a different time, your work is going to be a little bit off.
Wow. Okay, so I mentioned before about somebody who got back prints that were magenta. One of the reasons that you get back magenta prints is that your monitor is too blue. So your eyes are fixing the blue and you see it that way, but the fact is that they're still blue. Your eye compensates for it. So most monitors, when you buy them, are too blue and too bright, including the Apple monitors. So they need to be calibrated, all of them. And they need to be recalibrated because it's going to go down. Bringing back the other point is the room that I work in for my photography, I have darkening curtains over the windows. Those are special thick curtains that don't let in any light in. I wear a shirt when I'm doing my final thing that's black, because your shirt, if it's a different color or white, is going to reflect into your monitor. And then you, with your eyes, are going to change it around. You have to think of all these little things. The little light that's on in your corner, you know, affects you. You know, but the final analysis is, unless you're doing, I think, really high-end work or commercial photography where you have to get the colors right on, etc., there's also called it's good enough. So don't go super crazy. If it's good enough, you're happy with it. I think that's the thing. And so be happy with the work that you get, but do calibrate your monitors and realize. And the other thing is, I found I get cheater glasses. You know what cheater glasses are? You know, you go into Costco and you get 3 for the price of $20. You know, I got 20-something pair of glasses at home. And when you hold them up, a lot of them have tints in them. And, or if you're using, you know, blue, whatchamacallit. So I make sure when I get glasses, I tell them, no tints, no nothing, no colors, I don't want anything, no glare, plain glass. And she goes crazy, and she has to call up the lab and specifically state all that stuff, because everybody gets some sort of tint. So take your glasses and put them next to a piece of white paper and see whether or not, because that's going to throw off your colors too.
That you're using a different luminance when you're printing versus when you're editing?
Yes, when I finish doing all my edits, I will switch the calibration setting from the editing mode to printing mode, and so the luminance will be less. And when I do the print will come out exactly what the printing calibration had. So I'm often pleased with that result.
Yeah, I know with the iStudio, when you're working on it, when you get to luminance, it will tell you you need to tap your light down to that certain value. That's number one. So you're not too bright. But the other thing too is that once you get finished calibrating, iStudio 1 will give you images with someone in red clothes, blue clothes. It also does the gray toning for black and white. It will give you images so you can see, and it will show you, this is what your picture looked like before you calibrate it, and this is what it looked like after you calibrate it. And that way you can see how far your computer or your monitor has drifted. So, and I would suggest that you look at those pictures when you get finished calibrating, because you can see how far your stuff drifted away from what it should have been.
Yeah, I think things fit together a bit. Like, why do you print your own images at home? is I've used the Data Color or the Spider before, and I've had like 3 of those in 15 years because I have an Apple computer, and every once in a while the operating system breaks the hardware or you have to upgrade the software, and I just decided I was no longer going to use one of those anymore. And I have a Canon Pro 100, and it doesn't take custom ICCs anymore either. So, and I can't replace the printer. I'm not willing to. I have some ink, you know, and so I'm just not going to do it. So I have to do things like less scientifically than I used to. But I do have an Apple display monitor, which is pretty advanced. And I could spend an entire weekend trying to figure out how to use that. And then 2 months later, when I go to print again, I've kind of forgotten a lot of things. So it's not as fun as it used to be. And I have to make do. A lot of it has to do with economics because I'm just not willing to go out and buy another color printer and throw one that works away, you know. Okay. Yeah. Because I remember it used to be fun. It's not fun. It's not fun anymore. So I have 5x7 prints that I will print before I go and put a 13x19 piece of paper on there.
Yes, I would just comment that I have a P100, Canon P100, and I still get my ICC files loaded every single time. So I'd look into that because I don't think that's really an issue with, you know, loading them up. The other thing is that there is a lot of articles about calibration issues with P3 monitors. I would just investigate online through Google some articles that deal with those P3 calibration issues because there are remedies and answers to that you can find. Okay, we're going to move on to photographic paper and just wondering what types of manufacturers you use and what types of papers you use.
I use luster. Luster, it's between glossy and matte, and it really gives a nice finishing look to it.
For what it's worth, I know that part of the reason that you were setting up this presentation tonight is to support the reinvigoration, if you would, of the print competitions. One thing, I mean, I love matte paper. Matte paper when you're printing, because I only do black and white. Black and white on matte paper is just absolutely gorgeous. But I can tell you, if you were to print on a matte paper, either in black and white or color, and bring it in here to a print competition and put it in the light box, it looks absolutely terrible. For whatever reason, even though the light box is daylight color calibrated, it's a daylight color bulb in the light box, it just makes all of the tones look incredibly muddy. And I don't know why. But so if I was printing anything to put in a competition, I would always print it on luster paper because glossy paper, there's just too much reflection on it, too much sheen. So luster paper just seems to absorb the light a little better. But a matte paper, it just ends up looking really muddy. But if I was to print my own stuff at home and hang it on the wall, I would print it on a matte paper. I don't know, it just looks like crap. I mean, I've seen lots of prints put up in the light box that are printed on matte paper that just look terrible. And you come back to the table and you look at them, it just looks completely different.
When you print, you got to think about where it's going to be hung. Okay, just like if it's in a museum, they set the tone with the special lights for different people printing things. So to bring back your thing, you know, where is it going to be shown? If it's going to be shown with that light box, you have to think about that. It's only through experience. But if it's going to be on your wall with proper lights coming in, or I know I had a big piece hanging in a gallery, and the birds are supposed to be blue. Put them in the gallery, they were purple. You know, they didn't put in, their lighting was different. Yeah. So you know, you can go on with the story forever and ever and ever. Just have fun.
So as mentioned, you use a number of these photographic papers: Epson, Canon, Red River, Canson, Moab, Hamill, and Ilford. And I would say that some of the comments that you didn't pick up on this video was that Red River is more of an economical paper, but they do put out quality stuff and have great service if you call them and email them. So they are a quality paper, and I use their metallic papers. I'm happy with it. I'm starting to experiment with some of their other papers. When speaking about the finish of the paper, you're going to have, of course, your glossy, which is high reflectivity and very smooth surface. At the other end of the spectrum, you have your matte, which is a rougher texture and lower reflectivity, great for black and whites. In between that, the mid-range is your satin or semi-gloss, and these will have less reflectivity, and then you can get certain textures like your luster or your pearl finishes to them. In terms of materials used, the papers used, the best quality is your cotton. That is your fine art papers that will last 50 to 100 years. Then you have your alpha cellulose, that's your second tier. The most common photo paper to buy out there is your RC resins. They are coated on both sides of the paper, but it's made of wood pulp, and it's going to produce the different types of finishes and qualities that inkjets place on the paper to absorb properly and to dry properly. And then you'll get your specialty papers, which can be quite expensive. It varies. You get your rice, your mulberries, your bamboo. Less expensive would be your canvas, your metallic papers. I've used some metallics and are happy with using them. Other things to consider when purchasing photographic paper is what they call OPA, optical brightening agents. These are artificial agents that whiten your paper versus a natural white, which you'll mainly get in your cotton varieties. You have different paper white points, so you could have a really bright white that might go well with the black and white, but look terrible with color image. You have your creams, your off-whites. So there's a variety of whites that will be notated on the paper you're buying. The paper carton might also mention a D-max value. That explains the deepest shade of black that can appear on the paper. Usually a matte is usually under 2 and a glossy is over 2. So I haven't found that on many boxes, but there is a D-max value that is probably found in more specific information on the paper you're buying. Of course, there's the weight. You know, you're going to probably purchase something 70, 80, 90 weight. You get above 100, you're probably getting into more of a cardstock variety. And then the most important thing is when you purchase your paper, make sure that you download the ICC profiles for that paper. Every paper company or manufacturer has a list of ICC profiles for your specific printer. You want to download them and put them in that folder that I showed you earlier, because you want to then upload those into your printer when you print your project.
Ken, I think the other thing that's important is what type of ink you're using. Because if you go to Walmart, they did a study, ink starts fading in 15 years. So whatever Epson ink lasts close to 100 years. A lot of the professional photo labs, their ink lasts over 100 years. So it's archivable ink. So that's going to make a difference in how your picture is going to look way down the line. And especially if you're doing something that's an heirloom for someone, you want to use a printer ink that's going to last over 50 years. Archivable ink. It doesn't matter what paper you use. If it starts fading because of the ink, it doesn't matter.
Okay, we just want to make a few comments about printers. There's really two brands you want to look at. It's either going to be an Epson or a Canon. Really wouldn't consider any other printers for photography printing. I would suggest that the minimum the carriage to print would be 13 inches wide. Of course, you can get wider carriages, but the printer's going to be a lot more expensive. I just listed a few here that are 13 inches. You have your Canon Pixma Pro 200. I have the 100, but it's not available anymore, so now there's the 200. Uses 8 carriages. The cost of ink, the printer costs $490 and the ink replacement is $105. You have the Canon Image Prograph Pro 300, 10 cartridges, so a lot more ink to get your shades and selections there. Then you have your Epson printers, your Epson EcoTank ET8550. It's more expensive, $743, but the ink cartridge is $85, and I think they last pretty long. And then you have the PT Epson 10 cartridges. It also has a roll, so you can purchase rolls of paper instead of individual sheets of paper. That's $720. The ink replacement is $400, but you know the amount of prints you can get off of these printers are going to be different, and so I wouldn't just go by the price of ink replacement as a guide for you, but I would stick with either Canon or Epson printers. We are now going to look at soft proofing and using Lightroom as an example of how to soft proof your image before you send it to the printer. And the whole purpose of soft proofing is to simulate how your image is going to look when it's printed. It's taking into consideration the printer, the ink, the paper. It will reflect if there are any colors that are out of gamut, and it will show you further corrections that you need to make. Now, some people think when they're soft proofing, the soft proofing is correcting their image, but that's not the case. Soft proofing is showing you what it will look at and further corrections or adjustments you need to make with your image. And so with Lightroom, soft proofing is only available in the Develop module. So you want to go to the Develop module, then click the box at the bottom left of the screen or type shortcut S, and you will get into the soft proofing portion. This slide points out the number of steps you take to do the soft proof. Once the soft proofing is opened up, you'll notice under the histogram, you want to click on Create Proof Copy button, and then you want to select the profile you're going to use in terms of the paper and the printer combination. You also want to make sure that you tick the box that says Simulate Paper and Ink option. When you do that, you want to make sure that the gamut readings or warnings are turned off. Your gamut warnings are at the very top of your histogram on the left and right side. On the left side, it's referring to your monitor, where the monitor will show colors that are out of gamut. On the right hand side is the printer gamut warning, showing you what's out of gamut when it goes to your printer. So you want to make sure that both of those warnings are turned off. Otherwise you won't be able to correct your image properly at this point. At this point, you want to make adjustments to your image, or before that, you want to make sure that your original image is on the left-hand side of your screen and the soft proof is on the right-hand side of the screen, so you can make the comparisons. Normally, when it goes into a soft proof, the soft proof will probably be a little bit darker, possibly a little softer than what you see on the original image. So don't be alarmed. This is where you make your adjustments to make your soft proof look like your original image on the left-hand side of your screen. So you will make your adjustments. Your adjustment panel is right under the histogram, and you'll make your adjustments to correct your image. Maybe correcting curves, maybe adding brightness, maybe adding some saturation, clarity. You're determining what you want to adjust to make the picture, the soft proof, look like the image on the left-hand side. When you've done this, then you will want to send that soft proof to the printer. You could save your soft proof, but then it's the soft proof that will go to the printer. Now there is an additional step you can take to your soft proof if you want. Some people do this, not all people do it, but you can decide if you want to click on the gamut warning. So your image will show if there are colors that are out of the gamut color space that you were using. In this case, you click it on, turn it on, and it will show you in red those areas that are out of gamut. You can then decide at this time if you want to correct those areas. Usually levels, curves will do a good job of doing that. Or you can decide not to correct it and let the printer decide through the printer intent how it's going to correct these out of gamut issues.
So if you're soft printing for purpose of sending it out to a commercial lab, your file, that your JPEG or TIFF that you're going to send out is going to look different from what you ideally want to see on the screen, and you're hoping it's going to come back at the same as the pre-soft proof. I'm not sure. You're sending them the soft proof that you've edited again? Is that no?
The answer is that yes, the soft proof is the one. If you're sending it to a lab, the soft proof is the one that you will send to the lab. So you want to save it after you've made all your adjustments, and that's the one you will send. Once you've made your corrections and you want to go to the Lightroom print module and go through the settings there. As you see on this slide, there are three areas that you are looking at. One is the printing options and applying any output sharpening to your soft proof. Number two there is on the bottom left is configure printer settings and your page settings. And then on the right is your final step where you will click the print buttons, which initiates the printing. I just want to reemphasize is that once you get out soft proof, you're sending your soft proof to the printer module. You're not sending your original image to the printer module. Here's an example of the print module settings that you're going to proceed through. The first one is print to, so you can select file or printer. If you're going to print directly, just select printer, and then you will select your print resolution. For Epson printers, you want to select 360 ppi, and for Canon printers, you want to select 300 ppi. The Epson printers operate their inkjets a little bit differently, and so you want that higher ppi. You want to perform print sharpening or output sharpening, and so you select what paper you're using, and then you can select low, standard, or high. Probably low or standard would be the ones you'd want to go for in terms of sharpening. If you have the Nik software, they have their own sharpening app, and you can not only do your pre-sharpening while you're doing your editing, but they have also an output sharpening where you can also select if your image is going to be displayed on the internet or if it's going to be printed, and it will do the sharpening for you also. And then you will select the ICC paper profile that you're going to use, and you will also select intent. We will talk about intent on the next slide. Then you're basically ready to go. I will make the point that when you do actually print your image onto paper, you want it to dry for 24 hours. The ink needs a good period of time to set up and to bring all the colors out. You'll notice a big difference between your print after half an hour. It came out of the printer to 24 hours it came out of the printer. So give time for your print to dry sufficiently before you do anything else with it. Now under the print module settings, they wanted you to select if your intent was going to be perceptual or relative. And these two diagrams show the color space gamut, and it's showing on the left side what perceptual intent will do. You notice outside that triangle there are a number of colors that are like dots, and then there are lines stretching into the gamut. And so what it's showing is that any colors that are out of gamut in your image, it's going to pull those colors into the color space triangle there. But in the process, it's going to rearrange colors within that color space so everything becomes balanced. That means the colors outside that need to be brought inside are going to slightly change in their color, and colors inside that color space are also going to be slightly changed to accept the new colors coming in. So there's going to be very slight variations to a bunch of these colors outside and inside the color space triangle. Now with relative, it does it a little bit differently. Any colors within that triangle, that color space or gamut, are not going to be changed at all. They will remain the same, but any colors outside of that gamut or color space, they're going to bring them basically to the edge of that color space. So they might be altered very slightly, but nothing is being changed inside the color space. So the question is, what do you use? And as a general rule, if your image, you're interested in the saturation and overall color relationship, then you'll probably want to use perceptual. If you especially have a number of colors that are out of gamut, then you want to use perceptual. There might be a little saturation lost in the process, but it won't be significant. Now you want to use relative intent when tonal relationships are more important. So this is especially true in black and white imagery, and so the colors in this case aren't as critical as the tonal relationship, the shades in your image. And so again, black and whites work really well with relative intent. Are there questions or comments?
Softly. I talk too softly. So you can print to the printer, and you can also print to a file. So a lot of times I'll print to a file, and then I'll send that file to the printer, because it's amazing what Lightroom can do to your final image. And you can size it, you can do lots of things with the thing, put borders on it, lines on it. And so the other thing to think about is print to the file. And you set up a file on your desktop and
Okay, now we're going to be moving on to mount boards and matting. Lynn Roberts put together these slides, and she also brought demonstration of how to mat and the various tools that you use, and I've set them up over on the table. I know we're running out of time, so we'll get started on this. When it comes to your mount boards and your matting, if you're just placing your image on the mount board or the backboard, you can use various types of tapes to place it. Doing it this way, you don't have to worry about the size of your image because you're not putting a mat or a frame over it. Sometimes the adhesive you use to mount this image might not come off easy if you want to use your mount board again. When it comes to mats or framing, you can purchase those. They're usually at a cut size, 11.5 by 14 or 12 by 12. Or you can just cut your own mats. Of course, you need equipment to do this, so it's going to be more expensive and a little bit more of a learning curve. Next couple of slides show whether you go to Amazon, Michaels, Hobby Lobby, different places, mats, backing boards that you can purchase, and then also the additional types of tapes, pressure squares that you can purchase to use on your mats or your mat boards or backboards. This next slide shows how to mat and mount your image. It's the same process that Lynn has over on the table on how you put together your image with a frame or a mat. And so you can use linen hinging tape to really do the full process if you want to. But you place the two items next to each other, the mat, the backboard. You hinge them with the linen tape, putting tape down the middle of the two. And then you place your image, close the frame to see if it's lined up correctly, and then you can use linen tape to adhere the image to the backboard, and you can also use linen tape to seal the mat when you close it. So there's a link there where you can watch a video on how to do this. And then also, after we're finished, go over to the table and see the various materials and the mat and backboards that Lynn has provided for us to look at.
Depends how much you want to invest in your photography, but I invested in a wall-mounted mat cutter, so depends how much you want to invest in your photography. But there's lots of other ways of doing it, I know that.
If you're going to put sticky on your back of your mat, and especially if you're going to use a tape, you need to make sure you're using acid-free taping so you don't ruin your picture. That's highly recommended, especially if it's going to a gallery.
Okay, just a couple of other quick things. One is there are changes to the dimensions of digital images for the competition starting this fall, and so the horizontal side will be 1,920 pixels, and the vertical will be 1,080 pixels. If you're doing a square, it'll be 1080 by 1080. So the rest of the slide you can refer to. I'll be sending this out, but it's also in the focal point issue. It gives you how you can click and set up presets in Lightroom for all your images that you submit digitally. And there's also a great YouTube video that will tell you how to do this also. And so just reminding you of that. And then lastly, some resources. We've mentioned Nation's Photo Lab, the pixel chart that Lynn provided for you. Also reference to the Golden State Art, where she gets her mats and her backboards. Also want to mention Les Picker has his ebook out on fine art printing. This is a free book. Just go to his website, uh, sign up for it, and it's free. Then Keith Cooper, he's British, and he has an excellent site that deals with not only reviews of cameras and printers, those types of products, but also a lot of articles and videos on printing. And printing is a specialty, and so I think that's a great resource if you're interested in different types of printers and also printing. Then if you just want to try to grab something local that and you're in the Thousand area, Plaza Art Materials and Framing, you can get all these types of supplies there. They'll be a little bit more expensive than ordering from Amazon or maybe going to Michael's, but they're still a good place to go to get art and photo supplies. So thank you very much for attending. I appreciate all the contributions that were made tonight. It just made the whole night special. And I'll be sending this slideshow out, probably in PDF version in the next couple of days. Thank you very much. Good night.